Diablo 4 hit the gaming scene in 2023 like a drunken demon tumbling off Mount Ariyat. Messy, confusing, and instantly meme-worthy. Blizzard's much-hyped comeback stumbled spectacularly, with server meltdowns that made Diablo 3's infamous Error 37 seem quaint. Logging into Sanctuary was more like waiting in line for eternity, only to get turned away at Heaven's gates. Once inside, players discovered classes more unbalanced than a one-legged barbarian, loot about as thrilling as socks on Christmas morning, and endgame content that flatlined faster than a hardcore character facing Duriel for the first time. Yet by 2024 and 2025, Blizzard miraculously started cleaning up their mess. Servers became stable, loot regained its legendary status, and class balance finally resembled something fair. Today, Diablo 4 still isn't perfect, but it's clawed back enough credibility to remind players why they ventured into Sanctuary in the first place. It's proof that Blizzard can occasionally stumble into greatness, even if mostly by accident. From the very start, Diablo 4's gameplay felt about as thrilling as organizing your sock drawer. Sure, it fills time, but you're secretly wondering if life has anything better to offer. This isn't your nostalgic, just one more dungeon run grind either. This is the existential dread of realizing you're essentially performing the ARPG equivalent of repeatedly microwaving yesterday's leftovers, hoping they'll taste better the fourth time around. Spoiler alert, they don't. Blizzard promised us innovation, a sprawling open world filled with adventures. Instead, players quickly realized those lofty promises were emptier than a necromancer's heart. The core loop quickly devolved into a relentless barrage of fetch quests and item farming that made collect 10 demon spleens seem like the peak of creative ambition. Need to escort yet another clueless NPC through the apocalypse? Great news. Diablo 4 has hundreds more clueless NPCs lined up, just waiting to forget how their legs work as you drag them through demon-infested wastelands. Even worse, the infamous renown system turned seasonal resets into a sadistic chore, forcing you to repeatedly redo content you'd gladly banish to the deepest circle of hell. As one cheerful player quipped, regrinding your renown is basically the endgame. Nothing says innovative design like making players relive their least favorite chores every few months. Navigation was another comedic masterpiece. Blizzard somehow forgot to include an overlay map because clearly, frantically squinting at a tiny mini-map or pausing every 15 seconds to make sure you haven't wandered off into the vast emptiness of nowhere is exactly what fans were craving. One disgruntled player accurately summed it up. "I don't want to worry about navigation in an ARPG." Yet Blizzard boldly asked, "But what if you did?" And speaking of vast emptiness, the initial monster density was about as intense as a senior citizen's bingo night. Instead of hordes of terrifying foes, you often faced lonely stretches of scenery, punctuated by the occasional bored demon. Thankfully, Blizzard eventually cranked up monster spawns, but at launch, the game felt less like Diablo and more like a serene nature hike, interrupted occasionally by mild annoyance. All said and done, Diablo 4's initial gameplay experience was less a triumphant return and more a lukewarm reheating of tired concepts. Little innovation, minimal excitement, just a shiny treadmill spinning aimlessly. As one brutally honest review stated, Diablo 4 offered a repetitive and tedious gameplay loop with a complete lack of innovation, spectacularly failing to recapture the magic of Diablo's heyday. For a game hyped up for years, its debut was less hell unleashed and more hell politely asking if it could take a nap. And we haven't even gotten to inventory management yet, but trust me, that train wreck deserves its own special mention. If Diablo 4's monotonous gameplay didn't quite send you crawling back to Sanctuary's exits, Blizzard's ingenious monetization scheme surely sealed the infernal deal. Remember when they swore, hands solemnly on a pile of Diablo Immortal cash, that they wouldn't dare repeat past sins? Adorable. And to their credit, they kept their word. Diablo 4's microtransactions are purely cosmetic, so pure, they'll purely vaporize your wallet. Just step into Diablo 4's in-game shop, a nightmarish bazaar where common sense and financial restraint come to die screaming. At launch, A single armor skin, one solitary set, was priced at a cool 2,800 platinum. That's 28 real-world dollars, folks. Why blow nearly $30 on a fancy helmet? Because everyone knows demons flee in terror from designer fashion statements. And speaking of absurd price points, let's talk horse armor. The industry's most infamous punchline since Bethesda's legendary $2.50 DLC back in 2006. Blizzard, never shy to push boundaries, slapped a $16 price tag on Diablo 4's own version of horse armor. That's not just inflation, that's straight-up demonic price gouging. Imagine the pitch meeting. What if we resurrect gaming's greatest joke and then charge 640% more? Genius move. Player reactions ranged from disbelief to snarky despair as forums filled up faster than Blizzard's bank account. One bewildered article bluntly asked, "Why would a developer price skins at $28 in a game already costing $70? Easy, because people will, begrudgingly or compulsively, open their wallets anyway. And they certainly did. A leaked report revealed Diablo 4's in-game shop secretly hauled in over $150 million by its first anniversary alone. That's on top of Diablo 4's initial sales, a cool $666 million in 5 days. Coincidence? Blizzard clearly summoned some monetization demons to extract every possible cent from eager players. But hey, why stop at grotesquely overpriced skins? There's also the seasonal battle pass at around $10 a pop, and full expansions priced at $40 each, annually or so. Because naturally, paying $70 once wasn't enough. Welcome to Blizzard's premium live service paradise. Buy the game at full price, and then just keep on paying. Why settle for fleecing players once when you can fleece them indefinitely? Meanwhile, over in the land of sanity and generosity, Path of Exile remains free to play, supported by optional cosmetics and stash tabs. Imagine that, actually optional purchases. Turns out, you can earn the undying loyalty of millions by simply making a complete, phenomenal game without relentlessly shaking them down for spare change. Blizzard, apparently, skipped that memo. So yes, Diablo 4 might not be outright pay to win, but it's certainly pay to look moderately cool while doing the same repetitive tasks you already paid to do. Blizzard's message is clear. Vanquishing evil is noble work, but looking fabulous doing it costs extra. After all, why deliver value once when you can charge $30 for a digital cape? Evil never rests, and apparently neither do Blizzard's accountants. Diablo 4 stormed into the gaming scene with cinematics that promised a gripping, dark saga. Lilith, the mother of Sanctuary, made quite the impression, especially with a cinematic intro so chilling it made your spine forget it wasn't supposed to bend that way. Players settled in, expecting an epic tale of darkness, tragedy, and moral ambiguity. What they got instead felt like a narrative conjured up during Blizzard's lunch breaks. Rushed, bland, and decidedly less spicy than the average Taco Bell order. In previous Diablo titles, characters like Deckard Cain became icons, delivering unforgettable lines like "Stay a while and listen," which gamers happily mimified into oblivion. Diablo 2 and 3 brought jaw-dropping cinematics that had us all questioning our career paths and considering demon hunting as a valid life choice. Diablo 4, however, decided storytelling could apparently be outsourced to an AI suffering from mild existential dread. After Lilith's hauntingly strong introduction, the narrative spiraled into mediocrity faster than a hardcore character's unexpected demise. Characters like Inarius popped into scenes just long enough to leave players asking, "Wait, what was his deal again?" before promptly fading into obscurity like Blizzard's commitment to innovation. NPCs spent more time dumping exposition onto players than actually doing anything interesting, making the protagonist feel less like a legendary hero and more like a professional nodder at tedious board meetings. The campaign's conclusion felt about as fulfilling as finding a rare legendary item, only to realize it's for the wrong class. Lots of excitement, followed swiftly by soul-crushing disappointment. With story arcs dangling like carrots intended for future $40 DLCs, Blizzard's message was clear. Pay up next year if you actually want closure. because who doesn't love the tantalizing thrill of narrative blue balls? Metacritic reviewers sharply pointed out the story's abrupt ending, noting it concluded right as it began to finally pick up steam. Essentially, Blizzard turned Diablo 4 into an expensive Netflix pilot episode, where the rest of the season is locked behind a premium subscription tier. Granted, Blizzard still nails atmosphere and cinematics. Visually, Diablo 4 was stunning enough to temporarily distract you from realizing you'd stopped caring about the plot around Act 2. Lilith, visually and conceptually intriguing, sadly spent most of her narrative potential lurking off-screen, while your hero spent valuable story time perfecting their stoic, thousand-yard stare. Comparing Diablo 4's lukewarm storytelling to Baldur's Gate 3 feels almost unfair, like comparing a cheap motel to a 5-star resort. Baldur's Gate 3 provided gripping player-driven drama, emotional investment, and romances so unexpectedly compelling, players reconsidered their entire existence. Meanwhile, Diablo 4's memorable moment was turning Donan's son into a doomhorn? Inspiring stuff. Ultimately, Diablo 4's narrative was the gaming equivalent of ordering a steak and receiving a microwaved veggie burger, edible but profoundly disappointing. Blizzard clearly aimed to tell a story over multiple installments, but forgot the crucial rule. Your first bite better taste good enough to keep players hungry for more, rather than just leaving them hangry. Diablo 4's class balance drama unfolded like an infernal soap opera, complete with betrayal, scandal, and public apologies worthy of daytime TV. Fans had plenty to argue about, though mostly because Blizzard seemed intent on making class balance feel less like thoughtful design and more like spinning a wheel labeled, "Which class do we nerf today?" At launch, the class hierarchy was as balanced as a three-legged stool in an earthquake. Sorcerers and rogues merrily obliterated everything in sight, laughing all the way through Sanctuary, while druids and barbarians slogged miserably, grinding mobs with the excitement of peeling potatoes. Necromancers weren't any better off. Their skeletons were about as durable as a tissue paper umbrella in a hurricane. Just when players had figured out some creative builds to actually have fun, Blizzard slammed down patch 1.10, aka the Fun Police, ruining everyone's day simultaneously. Damage nerfs everywhere, cooldowns gutted, and critical vulnerability turned into a distant memory. Overnight, players woke up to find their precious characters had gone from gods to garden gnomes. Sorcerers, previously fearsome glass cannons, became glass without the cannon, shattering at the mere sight of an angry goat. Barbarians saw their best skills stomped into the mud, earning them the nickname Feels Bad class for most of early gameplay. Naturally, the fanbase took this about as well as a barbarian losing all their fury mid-battle. The backlash was so fierce, it made Diablo Immortal's microtransaction outrage look quaint. Blizzard, shocked at the level of unified hatred they'd inspired, swiftly held their campfire chat, a literal live-stream apology tour, promising players they'd never again unleash such a catastrophic nerf. Imagine screwing up so spectacularly, you have to publicly promise never again. Truly legendary stuff. Despite their apology tour, Blizzard's balancing act continued to feel like watching clowns juggle chainsaws. One season the rogue was untouchable, then Necros ruled. And next, everyone switched to Hammer Barb because bosses melted faster than ice cream in hell. Players had no chance to settle into their builds because the meta shifted every patch like an indecisive pendulum. Fast forward to 2025, Blizzard's approach improved marginally. Nerfs started coming alongside actual buffs. Groundbreaking stuff, right? It only took them 2 years to realize making weaker builds viable was a smarter idea than nuking fun ones into oblivion. Still, baffling inconsistencies remain. A perfect example, barbarian minions somehow outperforming necromancer minions, a scenario about as logical as giving a cat better bark stats than a dog. In comparison, Path of Exile's chaotic balance swings look almost reasonable thanks to Path of Exile's depth and variety. Diablo 4, meanwhile, remains trapped by its own narrower build options, where a single nerf could doom your favorite character to mediocrity. Blizzard's incremental improvements, coupled with a new class, Spiritborn, that didn't immediately break the game, have gradually won back some grudging goodwill. But veterans still hold on to their skepticism tighter than a necro clutching the bones of their fallen minions. Diablo 4 taught everyone a hard lesson. Playing your way is risky business, unless your way aligns with Blizzard's latest whims. Players remain wary, knowing the next patch might once again turn their favorite class into Sanctuary's punchline. Perhaps the most savage blow to Diablo 4's already bruised ego at launch was its so-called endgame, if you could even call it that. Imagine arriving at a decadent banquet hall after starving yourself all day, only to find a solitary, sad salad leaf staring back at you. That's Diablo 4's endgame in a nutshell. After slogging through the lukewarm story to around level 50, players face the thrilling prospect of nightmare dungeons? Just imagine regular dungeons, but slightly more irritating, sprinkled with modifiers specifically designed to increase your blood pressure rather than your enjoyment. Helltides? Mildly spicy open-world events that lost their flavor faster than chewing gum. Whispers? Fancy word for bounties that screamed, busy work. For the real gluttons for punishment, there was Uber Lilith, the equivalent of spending hours trying to open a tough jar, only to find expired pickles inside. Yay, bragging rights, but zero meaningful loot. The community's response? A collective sigh of existential dread. Players who speed ran to level 100 stared blankly at their screens, wondering if uninstalling counted as endgame content. A forum post from July 2023 captured the spirit perfectly. There's not a lot of content other than soloing dungeons or Uber Lilith. Many just uninstall. Nightmare dungeons, billed as the staple of late game, rapidly descended into tedious loops of monotony. Blizzard seemed to think we enjoyed running the same half-dozen maps hundreds of times while performing fetch quests like collect 3 idols to open a door, because nothing screams epic demon-slaying adventure quite like tedious backtracking and repetitive chores. The loot situation was even more depressing. Heaps of useless yellow rares, miserably low drop rates for build-defining uniques, and affixes rolling so poorly you'd swear the RNG gods were actively mocking you. Blizzard, to their minor credit, eventually woke up and realized players needed more than a hamster wheel and hollow bragging rights. Season 2 introduced actual endgame bosses, pulling fan favorites Andariel and Duriel back into the fray, making players feel briefly nostalgic before remembering they still had to grind for hours for a mere chance at something worthwhile. By Season 4, Blizzard rolled out Loot Reborn, finally providing a targeted way to craft uber-unique gear. Imagine that, actual motivation to play. Season 4 was praised for drastically improving gear systems and endgame loops, prompting reviewers to optimistically declare, Diablo 4 feels like a completely new game now. But let's be real. That's like celebrating the restaurant for finally putting actual food on your plate months after you paid for dinner. By 2025, Diablo 4 had added several bells and whistles, returning bosses like Belial, ladder systems, and seasonal gimmicks that occasionally stuck around. Sure, Diablo 4's kiddie pool was now slightly deeper with a few floating toys, but comparing it to the oceanic depth of Path of Exile still felt like comparing a puddle to the Pacific. Some improvements like Season 2's vampiric powers managed to inject fleeting fun, described by one Reddit user as making killing things fun and not a chore. But the improvements often felt more like band-aids than cures. Ultimately, Blizzard's endgame fixes felt a lot like finally giving customers the engine for a car they bought a year ago. Nice to have, sure, but understandably frustrating. Diablo 4 launched as a hollow shell, a flashy Lamborghini missing its engine, wheels, and seats. By 2025, it finally had all the pieces, but you can't blame players for feeling burned. Maybe next time, Blizzard, don't serve dessert before cooking the meal. You'd think after a development cycle roughly as long as human civilization, Blizzard could deliver a Diablo 4 launch smoother than an overpriced microtransaction skin. To their credit, Diablo 4's release wasn't Diablo 3's legendary Error 37 debacle, which was so bad it practically became gaming folklore. But let's not congratulate Blizzard for barely clearing the lowest possible bar. This was less a triumphant release and more like stepping barefoot onto a bunch of Legos. Technically survivable, but still agonizing. Right from launch, players were greeted with classic Blizzard-style server issues. Lag spikes and random disconnects were just Blizzard's subtle way of reminding you they control your fun and sanity. Hardcore mode players, those brave souls willingly subjecting themselves to permadeath, got the special privilege of experiencing involuntary character deaths due to server hiccups. Imagine sinking dozens of hours into a character only to have them die because Blizzard's hamster-powered servers sneezed. Painful? Yes. Funny? Absolutely. Quests also decided they didn't feel like working sometimes, bugging out spectacularly if more than 2 players decided to join an event. It was almost as if Blizzard never anticipated their massively multiplayer online game would actually be massively multiplayer. And let's not forget the hilarious werewolf glitch, leaving poor druids stuck permanently in werewolf form, doomed to eternally scratch fleas in town. It's not game-breaking, sure, but definitely embarrassing. Arguably the funniest, but also saddest, bug at launch was that elemental resistances simply didn't work. Yep, a core defensive mechanic fundamental to RPGs was essentially decorative at launch. Blizzard's sophisticated damage calculations apparently involved rolling dice and ignoring your carefully stacked resistances entirely. For 2 glorious months, players investing in elemental resistance gear might as well have been collecting digital socks. Useless, frustrating, but oddly comforting in their futility. Diablo 4 proudly launched without any kind of search functionality, forcing players into an impromptu game of loot-themed hide-and-seek. It's 2023, but Blizzard thought, you know what's engaging gameplay? Manually mousing over every piece of loot like it's 1998. Inventory management became a soul-crushing Tetris match as your stash filled faster than a Twitch streamer's ego. Gems, aspects, uniques. Your stash looked like a hoarder's dream closet within days. It was so bad, Blizzard sheepishly admitted adding extra stash tabs risked crashing the game due to memory issues. And performance? High-end gaming rigs were brought to their knees by memory leaks and random slowdowns after prolonged sessions, proving once again Blizzard's unmatched ability to make expensive hardware feel worthless. Console players weren't spared either, facing charming visual glitches like UI elements vanishing quicker than your seasonal loot. Ah yes, the disappearing malignant hearts bug from Season 1, a perfect metaphor for Diablo 4 at launch. Grind endlessly, get loot, then watch helplessly as it vanishes into the digital ether, mocking your wasted effort. To Blizzard's slight redemption, they hotfixed the most catastrophic issues fairly quickly, stabilizing servers and squashing exploits, because nothing gets Blizzard working faster than someone duping their precious loot boxes. By Season 2, basic functionality like elemental resistances and inventory management no longer resembled torture methods outlawed by international law. Still, Jez Corden summed it up best in his Season 8 critique. Every new feature seemed to come with fresh bugs, ensuring Diablo 4 remained eternally cursed, just how Blizzard apparently likes it. Ultimately, Diablo 4 wasn't exactly a cyberpunk-level disaster, but when your only real defense is, at least we didn't fail catastrophically, you've already lost. Blizzard, a studio once famed for obsessive polish, now treats its player base like unpaid QA testers. Congratulations, adventurers. You didn't buy a game. You signed up for an eternal beta test. You'd assume that in a game built around endlessly drowning players in loot, the developers might prioritize an interface that doesn't feel like it's actively sabotaging you. The launch version of Diablo 4 delivered a user interface that seemed lovingly crafted by someone whose only ARPG experience was watching gameplay trailers on mute, or perhaps ported hastily from a PlayStation with the enthusiasm of a hungover intern on a Friday afternoon. First on our list of UI sins, the stash. Calling it limited is an insult to actual limited things. The stash space was comically inadequate, barely enough to fit your ego after finally beating Uber Lilith, let alone accommodate loot for multiple characters. Players reported their stashes overflowing after gearing just one class, leaving alts in a gearless purgatory. To make matters worse, Diablo 4 launched without any stash search or filtering options, as if Blizzard believed players genuinely enjoyed the Sisyphean task of manually scanning hundreds of nearly identical icons. Trying to find that perfect ring with critical damage? Have fun mousing over your collection like a medieval scribe deciphering ancient texts. The Consumables tab, where nightmare dungeon sigils mingled awkwardly with elixirs, resembled less a neatly organized inventory and more a garage sale after a tornado. Then there's the delightfully cumbersome item management, clearly designed for the comfort of a controller and ported to PC as an afterthought. Tasks like splitting item stacks or quickly comparing gear stats felt more tedious than manually typing an Excel spreadsheet, because at least spreadsheets let you customize columns. Diablo 4's interface seemed to embrace minimalism in the same way a broken car embraces minimalism. Technically fewer features, yet not exactly by choice. Navigation didn't fare much better. Without an overlay map, apparently a feature too avant-garde for Blizzard, you were stuck toggling between squinting at the tiny mini-map or constantly pulling up the full-screen map, risking disorientation worse than trying to read a map upside down in the dark. Quest markers frequently lied about objectives, guiding players in maddening loops like a particularly cruel April Fool's prank. And tracking multiple quests simultaneously, you might as well ask the game to solve quantum physics. Blizzard graciously added multi-waypoint tracking later. Groundbreaking innovation, really. Social interaction at launch was similarly neglected. For an always-online game, Diablo 4 curiously lacked any meaningful tools for forming groups or trading. Global chat channels, initially non-existent. Group finder tools, laughably absent. If you wanted company for your dungeon runs, your best bet was awkwardly spamming nearby players like a desperate street vendor, or crawling into third-party Discord servers like some digital vagabond. Blizzard embraced the massively multiplayer aspect about as enthusiastically as an introvert at a networking event. At least there was the wardrobe/transmog system, arguably Diablo 4's greatest early achievement. Your character could indeed look incredibly cool, provided you spent real cash or sank hours into unlocking cosmetics. The dye system was neat too, allowing for that crucial personalization of armor no one else would ever notice amidst frantic monster slaying. Thankfully, Blizzard has made gradual improvements since launch, adding stash search, additional stash tabs, and finally giving gems their own inventory tab, a truly revolutionary concept. Each update was met with a collective, exasperated sigh of "should have been there from day one." But progress is progress. By 2025, Diablo 4's UI has graduated from outright hostility to mere passive-aggressive nuisance. Compared to rivals like Path of Exile, complex yet customizable, or modern RPG masterpieces like Baldur's Gate 3 or Elden Ring, Diablo 4's interface still feels like a relic unearthed from 2010, neither satisfyingly detailed nor comfortably streamlined. Ultimately, Diablo 4's initial UI was a marvel of irritation, a prime example of how not to handle loot-centric ergonomics. Or, as one Redditor succinctly described it, the UI is simultaneously one of the worst I ever encountered. Harsh? Absolutely. Accurate? Painfully so. Blizzard's communication around Diablo 4 has truly been an epic spectacle. Think less glorious hero's journey, and more watching your drunk uncle try karaoke at a family reunion. Pre-launch, Blizzard was on full charm offensive, swearing they'd learned from Diablo 3's launch disaster and promising, cross their hearts, not to repeat Diablo Immortal's egregious wallet-draining schemes. It felt sincere, heartfelt even, like that ex who swears they're totally a changed person now, really. Then Diablo 4 dropped, and so did Blizzard's enthusiasm for transparency. Early criticism of shallow endgame content and nerfs to beloved classes was met by a deafening silence. It felt as if Blizzard was pulling the classic, if we ignore the angry mob, maybe they'll go away strategy. Never historically effective, but always fun to watch implode spectacularly. And implode it did. The infamous Season 1 patch landed with all the grace of a falling meteor, annihilating popular builds and reducing Metacritic scores faster than Blizzard could nerf another sorcerer build. Suddenly, everything's fine became an untenable PR stance, forcing Blizzard to pivot dramatically into apology mode. Overnight, Communication turned into damage control theater, featuring nervous-looking developers on live streams admitting, in very politically correct terms, "Yeah, we goofed." From then on, Blizzard started behaving like a kid caught raiding the cookie jar, over-explaining, over-promising, and desperately reassuring everyone that lessons had been learned. Communicate early and often became their new mantra, especially when delivering the grim news of future nerfs, though promising not to immediately gut every fun build again unless absolutely necessary. Yet, even amid newfound openness, Blizzard had some impressively tone-deaf moments. Take the infamous Q&A, where a dev likened producing endgame content to gutting a fish, suggesting players were voracious, impatient monsters devouring content faster than it could be served. Smooth move, nothing like comparing your paying customers to dead marine life to win hearts and minds. Then there were features like a loot filter, begged for by players, but seemingly placed on Blizzard's eternal to-do list, right after fix elemental resistances, and just before finally admit an offline mode won't ever happen. It became painfully clear Blizzard's roadmap was perpetually stuck in slow motion, causing fans to perpetually exist in a state of anticipatory disappointment. Yet Blizzard did occasionally land a recovery shot, like their swift backpedaling after Patch 1.1's catastrophe, and subsequent follow-ups like Patch 1.1.1, now with actual sorcerer buffs and improved monster density. Imagine that. Their move to Steam felt like an admission they needed to attract fresh victims, players, to offset a declining base. Sure, the Steam launch stumbled, classic Blizzard, but at least they were candid while cleaning up the mess. Ultimately, Blizzard's Diablo 4 journey from arrogant overlords to contrite developers attempting genuine dialogue feels like watching someone repeatedly trip over their shoelaces, endearing yet exasperating. It remains to be seen if they'll deliver on their many promises or if they'll revert to old habits, but at least they've evolved past infamously asking players if they have phones, opting instead for a refreshingly humble, "We're sorry, and we promise we won't screw up quite so obviously next time." Progress, Blizzard style. Now we arrive at the center stage of Blizzard's master plan, a live service so limp it makes stale toast look exciting. Diablo 4, once touted as the triumphant evolution of the ARPG genre, instead turned into what many fans lovingly dubbed a clown fiesta of seasonal fluff. And let's just say, the clown car was packed. Blizzard decided to go all in on the always-online, forever-evolving, seasonally fresh model, complete with battle passes, timed events, and live updates. In theory, fine. In execution, picture someone juggling flaming swords while blindfolded, then setting their pants on fire. That's how it went. Let's start with the always-online requirement. Diablo 4 cannot be played offline, not even in the privacy of your own home, where the only demon you're slaying is your failing internet connection. For a franchise that once let you kill demons in peace, remember Diablo 2? Good times. This move felt like a slap wrapped in a terms of service agreement. Even solo players had to suffer rubber banding, disconnects, and lag spikes, all because Blizzard really wanted your dungeon to feel seamless, seamlessly frustrating maybe. Compare that to Baldur's Gate 3, which you can play in a cave with no Wi-Fi like a proper 2000 goblin. Meanwhile, Diablo 4 players live in fear that one day the servers will die and take their characters with them, like digital cremation. Then there's the seasonal structure, Blizzard's version of Groundhog Day. Every few months, a shiny new season drops, and you're encouraged, forced, to make a new character to access the fresh content. Except that fresh content? More like store-brand cereal. Season 1 introduced Malignant Hearts, basically demonic Cracker Jack prizes. Cool for 10 minutes. But the kicker? You had to re-unlock the map, re-grind renown, re-suffer the tedium. Players collectively groaned. I just did all this. Why am I doing it again for discount power gems? Many tried Season 1, blinked, and went back to whatever ARPG doesn't treat your time like an expired coupon. The seasons began to feel like a carousel with no breaks. Season 2 Vampires was actually fun, but oops, the powers vanished when the season ended. Every seasonal update added a gimmick, but removed the last one, leaving players with the feeling they were trading chocolate cake for plain rice. By Season 8, even journalists were facepalming. One headline might as well have read, "Please stop." And it's not just the content, it's the missing content. Features like loadout saves, leaderboards, or, I don't know, a working guild bank? Nowhere to be found at launch. Blizzard launched Diablo 4 like it was early access in disguise, hoping players would pay full price and wait patiently for the game to finish itself over the next 18 seasons, because nothing says premium product like a roadmap to mediocrity. Path of Exile players looked at Diablo 4's seasonal system and laughed from their Mount Doom of features. PoE reworks entire mechanics between leagues. Diablo 4 slaps a gimmick on and calls it a new era. Even when they did try meaningful updates, Blizzard's balance patches often felt like a drive-by nerfing spree. One patch in particular, Patch 1.1, was so brutal it inspired boycotts and memes. Fun detected, fun removed, the community joked. And naturally, it wouldn't be a Blizzard live service without monetization glued to every surface. Battle passes, FOMO cosmetics, timed shop items. Blizzard turned Diablo 4 into a mobile game in disguise. A $70 buy-in was apparently just the cover charge. If you wanted your character to look cool while grinding through seasonal fluff, that'd be an extra $20, please. And don't forget to come back next season. Those wings expire soon. What's most ironic is that the live service model was supposed to retain players. Instead, it hemorrhaged them. Many bounced back to Path of Exile, tried Last Epoch, or gave up entirely. Why stick around for lukewarm updates and corporate silence when other games throw you a buffet? Blizzard wanted to be the Netflix of ARPGs. What they got was a ghost town with patch notes. Now in 2025, things are better. Season 4 brought meaningful itemization changes. Vampires were fun. Some actual content landed. But the trust is bruised. The fanbase still wears scars from the launch and the sluggish drip of fixes. And the worst part? The next expansion doesn't land until 2026. So what's supposed to carry the game for the rest of the year? More seasonal soup with a new garnish? Blizzard's approach turned what should have been a glorious, blood-soaked return to form into a masterclass in how to bungle a live service. They promised us a feast. What we got were breadcrumbs scattered across a roadmap, and a waiter who keeps saying, "Next time, we promise." Diablo 4 in 2025 is still shuffling forward, haunted by what it could have been. The foundation is there, the ambition is obvious. But Blizzard will have to do more than drip-feed battle passes to earn redemption, because players aren't just content hungry. They're tired of being told the main course is coming next season. So, after all that hellfire, where does Diablo 4 stand in 2025? Is it a fallen angel clawing its way back to grace? Or still a cloven-hoofed mess limping through the ashes of its own hype? The answer? It's complicated. Like an ex who started going to therapy and might actually change this time, but also still owes you money. Let's start with the numbers, because numbers don't lie, but sometimes they do cry. Diablo 4 launched to rave critic reviews. 8s and 9s were flying around like loot goblins on Black Friday. Metacritic critics gave it an 86 out of 100, impressed by its grim aesthetic and crunchy combat. But the players? The user score cratered to a 2.5 out of 10. That's not just bad. That's one of the worst audience reactions in Metacritic history. That's, "Get Overwatch 2 on the phone. We need company in the gutter." Bad. Then came Steam, because Blizzard thought launching on another platform would be a great fresh start. Instead, it became a confession booth. Thousands of scorned players showed up, not to forgive, but to file a formal complaint. The initial reviews? Mostly negative. Diablo 4 basically walked into Steam and got punched in the face by its own past mistakes. Eventually, the rating climbed to mixed, which is the gaming equivalent of not awful, but still not invited to the party. Now let's talk population. At launch, Diablo 4 boasted over 10 million players and 700 million hours played. Huge. But by Season 2, people noped out faster than a hardcore character in lag. Steam charts showed a 60% player drop between Seasons 2 and 3. Season 3's start saw a sad little 12,000 peak concurrent users on Steam. To make it even spicier, Path of Exile started dunking on D4 in concurrent player numbers, like a smug younger sibling who studied harder and cleaned their room. Desperate to fill the servers again, Blizzard added the game to Xbox Game Pass and Steam, effectively tossing D4 into the bargain bin of attention. It worked, sort of. As of 2025, estimates suggest around 2 to 3 million active players remain across all platforms. Not bad, but also not the world-devouring juggernaut Blizzard probably envisioned when they slapped that $70 price tag and $28 horse armor on it. But here's the twist. Diablo 4 is better now. No, seriously. After enough backlash to power 1,000 Reddit threads, Blizzard actually listened. Season 4 and Patch 2.0 brought real improvements. Smarter loot systems, better endgame structure, new class, Spiritborn, and less grind until your soul leaves your body design. Some players are even saying wild things like, "The game is amazing now," and "I can't stop playing." It's like Stockholm Syndrome, but with cooler gear. Yet, not everyone's buying the redemption arc. A vocal chunk of the community still regards Diablo 4 as that game that could have been great, but tripped over its own monetization model and face-planted into a live service pit. They pop in every patch, sniff around, then leave behind a spicy forum post like, "Still no real endgame, uninstalling again." These people have long memories, and even longer receipts. Meanwhile, Path of Exile 2 is looming like a final boss. Diablo 4's most improved player vibe feels like a participation trophy handed out after a very public breakdown. Financially, Blizzard's not exactly crying. Diablo 4 raked in over $1 billion in its first year, and the expansion Vessel of Hatred sold decently. But even that was a tale of two receptions. Critics gave it a solid 84 out of 100, but users hovered around 4.2 out of 10. It's like people wanted to believe, but kept one hand on the refund button just in case. So where are we now? Diablo 4 is in the middle of a rebranding arc. It's improved, yes, but the trust is still shaky. The wounds from 2023 haven't fully healed, and Blizzard's on probation in the court of public opinion. One more screw-up, and the mob's ready to dust off the torches and memes. In summary, Diablo 4 today is like that cousin who used to scam people with NFTs, but now swears he's into fitness and meditation. He might have changed. He might be better. But you're still keeping an eye on your wallet and your Steam library. Diablo 4's journey has been nothing short of biblical, just not in the way Blizzard hoped. What was meant to be a triumphant return to the throne of ARPG greatness instead opened with the spiritual energy of a cursed loot goblin tripping over its own feet. The launch? A masterclass in how to incinerate fan goodwill faster than a fireball to the face. We're talking clunky combat flow, a story so lukewarm it could have been written by a demon on his lunch break, a monetization system that screamed, "Give us your wallet, or go kill skeletons in rags," and enough bugs to make Sanctuary feel like a breeding ground for Hell's own pest control department. Blizzard proudly marched Diablo 4 into the battlefield of modern gaming, only to be met with flaming pitchforks from fans when they realized the endgame loop was a content desert, the stash space was a cruel joke, and their favorite builds were being nerfed into oblivion right after launch. Oh, and the cherry on top, a $28 horse armor. Because nothing says hellish despair like watching your demon steed strut in overpriced leather while you struggle to find inventory space for another trash-tier axe. And yet, here we are in 2025. Somehow, against all odds and common sense, Diablo 4 is still alive. And better. Not perfect, not genre-defining, but better. Blizzard, after crawling through a minefield of Reddit rage threads and YouTube takedowns, has actually done some of the work. Season updates that don't feel like homework? Check. Loot that doesn't suck the joy from your soul? Sort of check. A new class that people actually want to play? Miraculously, yes. The game has shifted from dumpster fire with cutscenes to somewhat functional inferno with potential. Even the Metacritic user score rose from 2.5 to a mighty 4.2, Yes, a number so unimpressive it still sounds like a student begging their professor for extra credit. But still, improvement. Community reaction now ranges from "refund, please" to not bad with a few beers, which is practically a standing ovation in Blizzard terms. The live service model? It's limping forward. They've figured out that nerfing fun is not a sustainable development strategy. They're trying, pretending convincingly, and the player base, weary and jaded, is cautiously poking the game again to see if it'll bite back. But let's not get carried away. Diablo 4 still hasn't dethroned Path of Exile, which continues to feast on disgruntled ARPG fans like a bottomless buffet of burnt-out Nephilim. Diablo 4 remains in purgatory, a game not bad enough to quit, not good enough to fully believe in. If Blizzard wants redemption, they'll need more than one decent expansion and a dev stream with a sad apology. They'll need consistent content, compelling systems, and maybe a cosmetic store that doesn't look like it was designed by Beelzebub's accountant. Players can forgive a rocky start, but only if the path forward isn't paved with nerfs, bugs, and overpriced transmogs. So where does that leave Diablo 4 now? Still clawing its way out of the pit it dug for itself. Still haunted by its launch sins. But maybe, worth watching again. Just don't blink. The second they slip, the memes will return, the subreddit will combust, and somewhere in the shadows, that $28 horse armor will still be galloping proudly.